Hello, all, and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and each week I'm joined by some of my favorite husky, hairy, huggable homos to dish up some movie news sometimes. Although in weeks like this, whoa. All right, we're going to redo that because that did not work. Okay, the joys of doing it. The joys of doing it live. No, it's weird. I had popped open a window to pop up the chat, and then it started auto-playing the old video.
Okay.
Yeah. So
right. I'll just edit it out.
You guys are getting to see how the sausage is made if you're watching it on YouTube right now.
And that sausage is good.
One outtake.
Yum, yum, yum sausage. All right. Here we go. In 3, 2, 1. Hello, all, and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and each week I'm joined by some of my favorite husky, hairy, huggable homos to talk about something near and dear to our hearts, that, of course, being the big, wide old world of movies. And this week, we've got a big show coming for you. We are going to be talking about our top films of 2018 thus far. We're over the halfway mark of the year. A lot of films have come out at this point, and, we kind of trashed Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom a little bit last week. We kind of trashed Incredibles 2 a little bit last week. I feel like it's good to get some positivity out on the table. So we are very excited to share films that we're just in love with so far in 2018. But before we can get to that, I got two gentlemen I probably don't have to introduce to you. You probably already know them unless you're brand new to the show, but we'll do it anyway. Jim Pugliafico is back with us. Hey, babe, how you doing?
I am back. I'm not sure where I went, but I'm back.
Well, you went away from the podcast after we recorded last week, and now you're back on the podcast.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks, and welcome to the show, everybody.
And Will Lindis is here as well. Welcome, Will.
Hey, listeners. Hey, Brad. Hey, Jim. I'm going to count down my top 3 favorite movie bears, and surprise, here we are.
I know.
Wait, you're one of your own favorite movie bears?
Yeah. Why not? You got to have love for yourself, and I love our little Triforce that we have going on.
You've got to love yourself before you can love others.
That sounds like a country song in the making.
If you don't love yourself, how the hell are you going to love anybody else?
You got to love yourself before you love someone else. No, maybe.
When a bunch of gay dudes start talking about loving themselves, you know where it's going, right?
That's how they end almost every episode of RuPaul's Drag Race, too, with that.
Well, there you go. Well, listen, we got some other folks on the show with us so far this week. People are jumping into the live chat. Jordan Riley says, yay, I'm first in the chat. Hey, Jordan, glad to have you here. And we have another Riley with us, William C. Riley, who says, hey, it's my favorite hairy, huggable homos. William, aw, we adore you, my friend. Glad to see you here. Mark Evans says, woohoo, what a 3-way.
Hey.
Not a 4-way. I guess he's not joining.
I'm glad I stretched before this episode.
Oh man. Well, we're gonna fill some holes with a lot of movie talk on this episode. Yeah. So that's how we're gonna do it. So no movie news this week. We'll bring that back maybe next week when we do a one film review. But guys, we got a big old stuffed episode full of movie goodness. Are we ready to get into our top films of 2018 thus far?
Oh, hell yeah. I'm ready because we for those listening and those in the chat and stuff, we haven't really talked amongst each other about our top 3 for this year at all. So I don't know. I think there's going to be some surprises in here. We don't know if we're going to have any overlap whatsoever. There's been some. It's been, just like every year, it's been kind of a unique year for movies. There's been some huge summer blockbusters that we've already, quote, summer blockbusters that we've already gotten. somebody could make the argument that we haven't even seen the best of the year's movies yet with Oscar prestige season and still half the summer. I mean, the best summer movie has yet to come out. That's The Meg. It's going to be coming out, in about a month and a half.
Clearly.
I'm really hoping it saves the summer for me, but we'll see. Jason Statham and Crazy Big Sharks. I don't know how they could fuck this up.
Every single one of our lists comes with a little asterisk, which says, like, this does not yet include The Meg, which is clearly the #1 film of the year. But I mean, you're right. Like, I mean, every year we do this, and we get to this point, and it's like, it becomes very difficult to figure out what our top 3 is going to be, because we come into it usually with like a few different options. Like, oh man, like, is this #3? Is this #4? Is this #5? And then by the time we get to the end of the year, some of these films that are like in the 1 and 2 slot may be in like the 8 or 9 slot for the year after we've had time to marinate on them. And since we've had another whole 6 months of movies to come out. So this is exciting because it's not definitive. We still have a lot of year left to go, but it's a good sort of check-in on what the year's given us so far.
We need a Movie Bears podcast intern to like listen to this episode. And then after we record our favorite films of 2018 in January or whenever we do that, figure out for us where the films from this episode ended up sort of ranking in the discussion at the end of that period. I would be curious to see what the trend is, maybe even over the last few years that we've been doing this, how often these films end up at like a 5-1 slot.
Right. I mean, as much as I love, these films right here and that we're going to talk about tonight, who knows? They could get pushed even out of the top 10 or definitely out of the top 5. It's hard to tell. We just have to wait and see what the rest of the year brings us.
Yeah, especially, again, because we do have Oscar season coming up, which doesn't necessarily mean that those are higher quality films by default of that, but it does mean that the studios have more faith in them, probably because there's a quality element to them in a lot of cases. And so they hold them for that particular time of year. So you have to at least see those and consider them because a lot of them are quite quality. I mean, if you think about last year, we hadn't seen things like 3 Billboards or Call Me By Your Name when we were at the mid-year list, or even the Florida Project, I think, was a little later in the summer. So all of these films, which I think ranked relatively highly for all 3 of us in some way, shape, or form, weren't even part of the mid-year discussion. And that's pretty cool. Like that means that no matter how you're feeling about the year so far, this has been a great year for movies, this has been an awful year for movies, whatever, there's still a lot of year left. And that's exciting.
That's very exciting. Absolutely. And I know there's a lot coming up on our list that we want to see. We've already heard about. It'll be crazy to see how things go when Oscar season hits. But listen, as we jump into this discussion, I want to just kind of put it out there. For those of you guys who are listening live, you're in the live chat, we want to hear your favorite films of 2018 thus far as well. We've got a few that have been mentioned in the chat so far. Definitely keep popping those in there, and we'll share some of your picks too. But guys, the floor is open. Let's do this. And Jim, we are going to start with you. I'm curious. We are. Are your films like ranked 3-1, or do you just have like your 3 favorite films in no particular order? How did you approach your list?
Mine really aren't ranked at all. These are just the top 3. I mean, I didn't want to go through the excruciating pain of trying to, rank my children, favorite to third favorite. So I just, since I didn't have to do that, I just said, you know what? These are the 3 films I kind of took the top 10 that I've seen this year. And I said, okay, I got to pick 3 of these that rise to the top, rise above the rest, even though I really love the rest. And these are the 3 I came with. So no, there's no real order of preference, I guess, in these. But do you want me to go ahead and start with my first one?
Let's do it. Just pick one of your darlings that you didn't kill and tell us why.
Well, you guys might know that one of my favorite kinds of film is really like smart is a bad word when it comes to movies, but really, intelligent, I guess, hard and science fiction that really makes you think and really makes you feel at the same time. Well, we got a film earlier this year by writer-director Alex Garland called Annihilation that I really, really love. And I haven't even gotten around to watching it again. I think it's out on VOD right now. It's available on VOD. I can't wait to go back and watch this one. This one stars Natalie Portman, Jennifer Jason Leigh, Tessa Thompson, Oscar Isaac, Benedict Wong is in this one, Gina Rodriguez, Tuva Novotny. It's got a really great cast, primarily a female-led cast, which is awesome in this day and age. Natalie Portman turns in an understated but fantastic performance, I think, in this movie. It's Natalie Portman plays a biologist whose husband, and I'm not gonna spoil much in this movie, just to set up, whose husband, who was in a military type of operation, has disappeared at the beginning of the movie, and she signs up for this secret expedition into this mysterious zone where her husband supposedly disappeared, and to try to find out what happened to him and what's going on in this zone that isn't even really fully described in the movie or explained in the movie, just in general terms. And that's part of the movie's appeal to me, is that they don't over explain things for you. They let you experience the things kind of as the character does. Man, I just loved everything about this movie. It reminds me a little bit of, we talked about this, of a movie called Under the Skin from like 3 or 4 years ago. Alex Garland also did help me out here with the last one he did that we really liked.
Ex Machina.
Ex Machina. One of our favorites from that year. I think it was near the top of our list. This guy's on a real roll. I don't know what else to say about this movie, but it really kind of stuck with me. This was not one of these disposable sci-fi or horror movies. The horror elements in here are some of the scariest shit that I've seen, even in what you would call a horror movie. I wouldn't classify this as a horror movie. It's a sci-fi horror crossover. But there's been some hard horror movies this year that haven't touched the terror that was felt at points of this movie. So this one's definitely near the top of my list this year. What did you guys think of this one?
Well, mine's pretty easy to do. In fact, I know I'm next up on the list, so might as well merge them. This was going to be my number one pick because it's I think the best film of the year, hands down. So very, very good choice to be here. You end up with this really strong, basically all female led cast, which I think was a smart way of putting this film together. But every single character brings something powerful to the story. This is a very thematically dense movie. Like, the more you watch it and the more you think about it and the more you pick it apart, the more you kind of grasp what the film is trying to say and how it's saying it. And it does leave itself open to a few different interpretations, but all of those interpretations are very much founded in, like, this isn't a movie that's abstract for the sake of being abstract. Everything here is very purposeful and goes to the point of telling the story about self-destruction in its many, many different ways. There is that horror element that you mentioned, which is quite frightening as it shows up. But this is, more than anything, this is a hard sci-fi film with those horror elements kind of woven in. There's also some moments of absolute beauty, specifically some scenes involving Tessa Thompson, and I won't go into what they are, but there's just a sequence with Tessa Thompson that is absolutely gorgeous.
Beautiful, but horrifying at the same time. That's the thing. Yeah. That's incredible.
So yeah, this is one of the best films of the year. If not, like currently it's hard to know where things are going to land. But if I were to rank right now what my number one film of the year is, it's Annihilation, hands down.
Awesome.
Pretty high praise for this film. I will tell you, this almost made my list, guys. In fact, it came down to a battle royale. That's the popular thing these days, between Annihilation and another movie for a spot on my list. Unfortunately, the other movie won out, and I'll tell you more about that film here in a second. But I absolutely agree. I mean, this movie was phenomenal. Poor Natalie Portman, she's come so far since her Star Wars prequel movie days, and she gets so much shit for having done those movies and then being so terrible. But it's films like this that really helped to kind of put her, I think, in the forefront of people's eye in terms of what she's able to bring to the table. She can carry a scene. I mean, she was pretty phenomenal in Jackie. Really liked her in that. And now she's got Annihilation. I mean, she's on a roll. And I think this film, I mean, you guys mentioned many reasons why it's awesome. Any film that has the word shimmer as like a scary thing going on is a win in my book.
It sounds gay enough for me.
It does, right? Like, we're just coming out of Pride Month and everyone's like, did you get your shimmer on? Did you get your glitter dance going? And when I hear those things, I think of a big rainbow wavy wall.
I haven't heard that. You're having a better Pride Month than me. I haven't heard anyone ask if I've got my shimmer on. But I kind of want to. Like, next Pride Month, that's what I want. Like, everyone that's like right now, like watching in YouTube chat, like if you're just like, man, like 2019, we want to make Will's like Pride Month. Just like ask me how my shimmer is. Like that's what I'm asking all of you. But not now. It's got to be June 2019, next Pride Month.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Or will just go to another state that does Pride later in the year, like in the Southwest, because it's so fucking hot here. Ours is in September. Just come to Tucson in September, and we'll shimmer it up together.
Yeah, technically, I think that's when Austin's is as well as like.
Oh, there September, you go.
Because and then we have a whole thing. We have one in June and we have one in September, and they sort of clash with each other and. I don't get it.
Well, great pick, Jim. The movie that won out this slot for me, and I did kind of rank mine a little bit from 3 to 1. I mentioned it was another sort of horror / sci-fi ? Movie. And Jim, I think from your facial expression, you knew right where I was going when I mentioned that. In fact, this movie was called out by Jordan in the live chat earlier as one of his favorites. And that film is, of course, A Quiet Place, directed by John Krasinski, starring John Krasinski, Emily Blunt, Millicent Simmons, and Noah Jupe. If you haven't seen this movie yet, not going to spoil anything, don't worry. This has been a great year for kind of horror / suspense films. You guys mentioned Annihilation. Hereditary was one that we talked about a couple shows ago. And I think this movie kind of lands in a nice kind of cool spot between the two in a way that like introduces some light sci-fi elements. It's not really supernatural, so to speak, but it does a really great job just sort of building suspense, tension, and making me fucking anxious as hell. I've seen the movie twice now. Basic premise of the movie, there's these creatures who, they have amazing hearing. If you make noise, they fucking come for you. I don't know why I'm saying fucking a lot on this episode. Whatever.
Gotta get those fucks out. You gotta give fucks when you can.
Maybe it's because I'm reading this book called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. And like on every page, the word fuck is on there like 20 times. That's probably why.
Brad, is this how you get your shimmer on?
It's totally how I get my fucking shimmer on. But yeah, so I think this film just does a really great job at sort of building that tension, making you afraid of these creatures. Both times I've seen this movie, I mean, literally like on the edge of my seat and afraid to make noise in the theater. Like I have my movie candy and I'm like, I'm totally hungry for these Raisinets. but the film is so quiet. How do you eat your Raisinets in a movie theater in a movie where they're not making any sound? You know, you try to wait for those explosions, but this isn't a Michael Bay movie, so they're few and far between. But I love this flick, guys. I don't know if it made your list or not, but what did you think?
Yeah, this one. Go ahead, Jim.
No, you go.
I was gonna say, yeah, this one's not in my top 3, but it's definitely a solid pick. I think the thing that works most powerfully in this film's favor is just how remarkable its sound design is. In fact, if we were just doing like what are our top 3 sound designs of 2018, I would go, okay, A Quiet Place, and let's fill in the rest of the spots. The silence is palpable and it's energetic, and whenever there is noise, because you know that noise equates to death in this world, it's terrifying. Like, and it can be something as simple as like a clattering of a plate, or just like someone talking slightly louder than a whisper, and you're just on edge. You're just and it's not jump scary stuff. It's not like those weird record scratch or cat screech things that you see in a lot of like really bad horror movies. This is scares built from a very organic sense of sound. That's wonderful. That is wonderful for us to have terror based on something other than primarily visual cues, which are usually what we see out of horror movies. So on that basis alone, even putting aside the fact that you've got some great performances and a really compelling family dynamic and a really cool monster design, even putting all of that amazing stuff aside, this one's very worthy of that spot on the quality of that sound design alone.
Yeah, Will, actually the sound design is like molds this movie into what it is. And not just that, but I mean the tension of the you know, the story, because they can't make sounds. The monsters themselves are pretty frightening. You know, they're not. I don't want to give too much away, but I think the monster design, and they show just enough, I think, of the monsters in this movie to make it to add to that tension. I thought the acting all around was great. There are some moments in this movie that are meant to really amp up the tension. Like they'll just show a shot of an inanimate object sitting somewhere and a human in the same frame, and you're like, oh my God, this is going to happen. And then it doesn't happen, right? So it subverts your expectation that way. But yeah, great pick, Brad, on A Quiet Place. It was up there on my list too. Definitely in that first grouping of 10 that I had picked. But Annihilation just kind of edged it out for my sci-fi, you know, horror movie pick.
Well, gay guys are all about edging, so I'm not surprised, Jim.
I was waiting for that. Yeah. And I'm so glad you delivered. Thank you.
Oh, goodness. You waited, but we delivered eventually. Hey, we started a whole sub-conversation, apparently, in the live chat about Raisinets and movie theater candy. Jordan says that my Raisinets are a stupid, not believable choice, whatever that means. I don't know. But Jim, what is your go-to movie candy?
Ooh, any kind of chocolate covered nut. How's that? That could be chocolate covered almonds, peanut M&Ms, or goobers. How's that?
There you go. Nice. Well, I know you mentioned it in chat, but for any of our listeners who might be curious, let's say they want to buy you a movie candy at Fantastic Fest. What is your go-to candy?
First of all, please do. I love candy. And second of all, my top 3, if we're doing top 3s, are Sour Patch Kids, peanut M&Ms, and Reese's Pieces. And it just depends if I want sweet or if I want peanut buttery or if I want chocolatey.
Nice. Some very good choices. Mine are Raisinets, Reese's Pieces, and gummy bears or gummy worms. Preferably like the candy store kind that you get out of the bins and put in a bag that they charge you like 30 times the going rate for at any other store. Those are the best.
The kind you should be sneaking in your pocket instead of buying at the concession stand.
See, I can't eat gummy bears at the movie because movies are dark, right? And I've long since, I can't eat gummy bears without like eating two at the same time and like decapitating one and taking the body off the other and turning them into like a little like gummy Frankenstein and then eating that. Like that's just like my way of eating them. So it's like I love gummy bears, but like it'd be hard to do that in the movies and people would probably stare.
Especially if you made little screaming noises when you chewed its head off.
Yeah.
And then like gurgling noises.
So you're basically making your own movie. Yeah. You're basically making your own horror movie as you're watching a movie eating gummy bears.
This explains so much.
The gummy bear massacre.
So William Riley in the chat says, my nickname is Gummy Bear. William Riley, if you ever see a movie with William Lindis, watch out.
Nibble, nibble, nibble.
All right, guys. Well, we got more movies to talk about. Let's move on to our next set of picks. Jim, you're up. What is your next film?
I just want to make, if you give me an aside for a second. Somebody new in the chat, Kelvin Cabrera, says he loves that Reese's Pieces basically only exist now because M&M's turned down Steven Spielberg for having them in E.T. As you know that Reese's Pieces were the candy that Elliot left as a trail for E.T. to follow in that movie.
Spoilers.
So, yeah, well, sorry about that. I'm spoiling a movie that's 30 years old, maybe more. I don't remember. Okay, you want my number 2 movie?
Sure.
And one of the things I try to do is figure out like what is the common thread in like my top 3 movies. And I think I've got it this year. But I'm not going to reveal it till the end because it might give away my first pick once you hear the second one. My second pick is a movie that kind of snuck up on me. I got to see it at South by Southwest. Lean on Pete is the name of the movie. It's a movie by writer-director Andrew Haig, who gave us 45 Years, which I love that movie. Another movie called Weekend. Brad, I know that's one of your favorite movies. Andrew Haig is a director that loves to focus on his characters, and I'm a character and story guy. So a lot of his movies, are kind of like right up my alley. This movie is about a teenage kid who's kind of down on his luck. You could say he's from a broken family. That would be kind of an understatement. And he gets a job working for a horse trainer and, ends up befriending this kind of broken down racehorse called by the name of Lean on Pete, when the movie gets its name. And what I like about this movie is you can listen to the description, watch the trailer, and go, "Oh my God, I know where this movie's going." The kid ends up riding the horse and wins the race at the end, and things are happily ever after. And I know where this movie's going. It's a feel-good family movie. If you know anything about Andrew Haig's movies, you know that it's probably you can almost guess that it's probably not that. And this movie is not that. This movie subverts your expectation. It is a great study in characters that are kind of live on the edge of existence, basically, and how they struggle and how they make their way and kind of the relationships that they forge to get themselves through some of the roughest times in life. And that's what Lean on Pete is about. And, that may sound like a downer, but I'm sorry that that's what this movie is. But I really love this movie. This movie had me thinking about it even still to this day. I don't know when this movie is going to get any kind of VOD release. I don't know if it's going to get any kind of awards push. The movie stars Charlie Plummer and Steve Buscemi and Chloe Sevigny is in this movie. Travis Fimmel. Charlie Plummer basically is this young actor who he was in another movie called what was it? All the Money something.
All the Money in the World.
Yeah, All the Money in the World. And he carries this movie for a face that we've hardly ever seen before. His performance in this movie is incredible. Still probably my favorite performance of any actor so far this year. It's called Lean on Pete. If you get a chance to see this when it comes out on VOD, I think it's gone from movie theaters right now. Check this movie out. It like I said, it stuck with me and one that I'm going to be thinking about for a long time.
You know, Jim, I've got some good news for you. So I missed this one at South by, and it did like a very, very quick like theatrical here, and so I didn't end up seeing it here. So I've been keeping an eye out for this one for when it would hit streaming. And the answer to your question is today.
What?
It's on Amazon VOD, not for rent but to purchase. So usually it's about it leads by by about a week before like the rentals happen. But yeah, as of right now, someone can go and I'm sure iTunes too, but like they can go and watch this movie you're recommending. So this is wonderful timing.
Yeah, that's so awesome to hear, because I was not able to catch this movie at South by, and I've actually been reading the book, and Jim and I have been listening to the audio tape of the book, and I'm enjoying it a lot so far. But I don't know. Anytime you got a story about a boy and his horse, there's just magic that is probably prone to happen on the movie screen. And so, I think books are great. I love to read books. Oftentimes books are better than the movies, but I've heard so many great things about this film. Trying not to let it overhype me for it, but at the same time, I really want to see this. So that's awesome news indeed.
Yeah, and it's something I worry about too, is that overhype, especially on a movie like this. This movie doesn't have the dramatic or the whiz bang framework to kind of stand up to all the hype that might be kind of put on it, because it is a very quiet character study. Will likes to use the term slow burn. That's what this movie is, but sometimes those are the ones I find the most rewarding. And this definitely hits the mark there. So
Steve Sosa says, please just tell me the horse doesn't drown in mud because the horse gets depressed. Atreyu!
Yeah, nice. No, well, I'm not going to spoil. So
all right,
you'll just have to find out what happens in this movie to both Lean on Pete and Charlie, the main character.
There you go. All right. Awesome. Will, what's your next selection?
I'm going to see if you guys can guess this one based on only this clue, which I don't know if it's a great clue or not. But my number 2 pick is the film that I've seen the most times theatrically this year.
I know what it is.
What you got, Jim?
It's a documentary.
Yep.
It's one we just saw recently.
Yep. It's
Ding Ding.
Won't You Be My Neighbor. The documentary Won't You Be My Neighbor by director Morgan Neville, who did 20 Feet from Stardom. This is the documentary about Fred Rogers and Mr. Rogers and his life and his legacy. And this documentary, I've seen it 3 times theatrically now, and it gets the waterworks going every single time. Like sometimes you'll see a movie with like an impactful thing, and like the first time you see it, it emotionally hits you, and then subsequent viewings, it's maybe a little more muted because you're looking at other elements. And this one, it just absolutely wrecks. And it's not because it's a sad or it's a tragic story. Instead, it's the story of this man who is almost too good for this world. This man who I feel like whose message is probably as needed here in just the ugliness of 2018 as ever he was needed. I love how this film dispels a lot of the myths about the man, how it goes into sort of his impact through the ages and, generationally too, because, you have people who grew up with Mr. Rogers and then whose kids grew up with Mr. Rogers. This movie is full of light. It's full of joy. And it's actually, aside from just all of those fun elements, it's an incredibly well executed and well put together documentary from a craft perspective too. You have, it's not just talking heads, the blend of archival footage, juxtaposed against the interviews, crafts a really interesting narrative all the way through that's super engaging. You have some animated sequences which help show sort of a glimpse of who Fred Rogers was at his core, without hammering it over your head too much. And then there's this wonderful score that is inspiring and uplifting and just crazy powerful. Won't You Be My Neighbor is easily the best documentary I've seen all year, and it's one of the best films period I've seen all year. And if you haven't seen it yet, you absolutely should. It will warm the cockles of your heart.
You know, Will, it's interesting that you bring this movie up because my next pick is next. And while my next pick is not the same number, maybe, as some people in this slot, this is actually my number one of the year so far. This is a huge one for me, too. And we just saw this movie over the weekend. So, man, I have some really fond memories of watching Mr. Rogers as a kid. And after seeing this movie, I kind of remembered something that I think I had forgotten about. Maybe I repressed it. I don't know. But I had I guess didn't realize like how forward thinking Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood was. And, you know, the documentary talks about some of the things the show did to, you know, for instance, try and comment on racial issues in the United States. And so I had an elderly member of my family one time walk in while I was watching Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and Mr. Rogers was like hugging on Officer Clements, who's African American, and this elderly member of my family threw a shit fit and was like, "That's not right. That shouldn't be happening. Like, they shouldn't be doing that." You know, she was like, "Are they, you know, faggots? He's black." And it was just this crazy thing. I didn't even understand it as a kid, like what was going on. And you know, now I kind of am starting to, you know, after seeing this movie, I think put some of those pieces together. Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, I mean, that show was on for how many years? It started late 60s, right? And then ended early 2000s.
I mean, yes, and it had some breaks, but I think it ended up with like one of the counts I think I saw on it was something like, was it like 1,700 episodes or like something like ridiculous like that?
And spanning multiple decades, right? And so for me, like, you know, growing up, like I didn't really see any difference between like myself and African American kids or, you know, gay kids or like whatever, you know what I mean? Like I just thought we're all kids, like this is all what we do. And I think it really highlighted for me that like adults were not necessarily that way per se. But it's interesting in that in watching the film, and they kind of talk about how, you know, a kid's television show just tackled so many crazy social issues. And I think helped to break down some of those divides. So, you know, you wouldn't think, you know, a TV show where they're like, "Hey kids, let's talk with hand puppets," could like change the scape of politics on a national or international scale. But Fred Rogers, we miss you, and you did phenomenal things for the world. I'm so glad that we have this movie to kind of like put that front and center, because I don't think people thank Mr. Rogers enough for all that came about as a result.
No, and I don't. It's amazing when you go back and watch it now and see there's a sequence at the beginning of the movie that talks about the very first week that the show was on and some of the topics that were kind of woven into this kind of make-believe story. I mean, Mr. Rogers' show had kind of the real life stuff where it was cool, where he had Mr. McFeely and Officer Clemens, and he took us to some cool places and showed us like, this is how it's made before like the "this is how it's made" videos came out. Like he took us to cereal factories and all kinds of cool places. But then he also had the land of make-believe, right? You get on this trolley, and the trolley takes this land of make-believe, and there's all these characters with these amazing voices, and they do all these morality plays and all kinds of things. And as you're watching it as a kid, you don't really get what the core of, I mean, it's not super preachy to kids. Like, kids, well, you know, everybody's the same, and inside and blah 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 blah. It just did it in such a way that respected children's way of learning and their emotional feelings. And I often wonder now, like, how much watching a show like that has molded me as a person. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Maybe even more than we imagine. And going back and watching this movie makes you think, like, this show had to have impacted me in some way, because I watched it, pretty regularly when I was a kid growing up. So yeah, just really an astounding documentary. I had a question for you guys, though. Do you think this would play the same way to someone who didn't grow up watching Mr. Rogers?
I mean, it's hard to say. I think that part of what worked with Mr. Rogers was definitely the time in which the show aired. Not that it was a time of a sign of its time and a product of its time. We definitely have different production values and different, and more importantly, I think more different methods of consuming media. I think more children watch things like YouTube than they do, or even Twitch, than they do necessarily like sitting down and watching Saturday morning cartoons. That said, one of the things that makes me sort of optimistic about right now comparatively is that while Mr. Rogers, especially like in the 80s, there was like this, I loved the cartoons that we grew up with in the 80s, but they were trash, wonderful, like they were candy. They were candy, they were sweet, but they weren't really good for you. And then you had Mr. Rogers, which fit very well against this. Nowadays, I think children today have some of the best programming, at least in my lifetime. Things like Steven Universe and Gravity Falls and Adventure Time, and there's just a lot of like Star versus the I'm drawing a blank on it right now, but there's a lot of these different shows that are for children and which tell complex stories with messages and stuff like that. We don't have a Mr. Rogers, but we at least have, I think, maybe smarter programming than for kids nowadays than probably we've ever had.
Yeah, I don't know that I agree with calling some of those shows trash or not good for you. Certainly they're bright and colorful and maybe loud, but like I compare like experiences with Mr. Rogers to He-Man, for instance. He-Man did an awesome job of working sort of like the moral of the story, like into the story, and then they'd have a segment at the end, and it would be all like, in today's adventure, we talked about the importance of like seeing people as they are rather than, judging them, judging a book by its cover or whatever. And I love that about He-Man. I love that it brought those morals front and center. I think that was really wholesome. That shaped a lot of my life. But I think what was different about Mr. Rogers, even though the He-Man morality and some of the morality in other shows was good, is Mr. Rogers talked directly to the kid, like consistently. It wasn't like, it's a good idea not to play with guns because you might hurt yourself. Mr. Rogers would talk right to you and be like, what do you think would happen if, you did this and a person felt this way? And it was almost like he was having a conversation with you and just you directly through that TV. And then when you would bring in things like, Daniel Striped Tiger, for instance, sort of manifesting different aspects of Mr. Rogers' personality and those morality plays, I think it all just worked really well together to take it even more forward. Unfortunately, I don't think you can have mainstream programming like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. That's why it was on PBS back in the day to begin with. And I know tons of people in our generation, Will, who never even watched Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood because they're like, oh, it looked dumb. It was stupid.
It's for kids.
Yeah. And so I think they totally missed out on a lot of that stuff. And judging by some of their like social skills and how they regard other people, I'm not surprised.
Probably the closest analog these days, and probably has been for years, would be something like Sesame Street, just because it's a show that's, I think a lot of times it leans very heavily into the like education in the form of like, math and spelling and stuff like that. But I know recently there's been a big push on the show in terms of things like inclusivity. Like they've introduced like a character that's on the autism spectrum and have used her in some like kind of shorter segments which have been online. So I think that you get some of that like inclusivity that you get, but you don't get the same, you don't have the same, like you said, like the dialogue with the child. It's more of like a skit for the child. I don't know how you recreate that without just like resurrecting Mr. Rogers, and which I'm cool for. Like if we figure out like the if I were to like some necromancer figured out the way of doing that without it being some reanimator thing, I'd totally be down for Mr. Rogers coming back and creating more programming.
George Hammond. No, not George Hammond. John Hammond I've been watching a lot of Stargate SG-1, is going to find a mosquito trapped in amber that bit Fred Rogers back in the late 60s, and will use that DNA to make a clone, and maybe we can try to recapture the magic. Probably not. In any event, guys, I think we could review Won't You Be My Neighbor the whole rest of the episode and be just fine. But we have possibly 3 more movies to discuss. Before we do, Jim, it looked like maybe you had a thought.
No, I was just thinking Mr. Rogers in a Jurassic World setting and with Blue, and maybe somebody could really kind of get on the same wavelength with Blue and the T-Rex, and
maybe
get all the dinosaurs to calm the fuck down.
Daniel Striped Tiger is like, have you guys ever thought of just talking to each other instead of roaring and scratching? That would be crazy. All right, hey, let's kick off our last round of favorite films of 2018 thus far. Jim, what is your remaining pick?
Oh, my remaining pick is kind of another one that I don't know how many people got to see this year, called The Rider. This one, it was another one I think I got to see at South by Southwest. It was one that I had been hearing about all the previous year. This one did actually premiere at festivals kind of mid-2017, actually. And I've been dying to see it just based on the trailer. It's written and directed by an up-and-coming filmmaker named Chloe Zhao. And this one is about a young cowboy who suffers a really bad head injury, while riding broncs in the rodeo. He's a rodeo rider. And he now has to, he's been told he can't really ride anymore, or he'll risk his health even more. And he has to figure out what he's going to do with his life. He's trying to, help support his family. He's trying to figure out, he now can't do one of the things that he really loved to do. It's kind of way of life for him. And so that's the basic gist of the story, The Rider. But what's astounding to me also is, again, another great performance at the center of this movie by a totally untrained actor named Brady Jandreau, who is an actual rodeo cowboy guy that Chloe Zhao, the writer-director, kind of stumbled across and said, you need to be in my movie and play this guy. And his performance is amazing. Like one of the most authentic performances that I've probably seen this year. Also, not only that, but in the movie, his family is played by his real family, his dad and his sister, his sister, who has a what do we want to say? She has a some sort of like emotional or affliction, where she's kind of developed in a certain way that she struggles with things, and so he's taking care of her. And again, another movie about basically about horses and a guy, right? So two of my top 3 movies of the year our horse movies. And I was going to say that the thing that ties it all three movies together is they all feature animals. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah.
I was trying to remember if Natalie Portman rode a horse into The Shimmer.
Not a horse, but there are animals in Annihilation. So that's the one thing that kind of ties them all together. Again, this is a quiet movie. It's a beautifully shot movie, a beautifully scored movie. I fell in love with this one. This is another one that I really want to see again as soon as I can. I don't know if either one of you got Brad. I don't think you got to see this one, but Will, I don't know if you got to see it.
But I wanted to see it.
I watched it with you.
Oh, did we watch it together?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. This is one of the ones we watched together. Yeah. This one again is one that I walked away from just thinking about for days. So it's called The Rider. Check it out if you have a chance. Great film.
Yeah, it's great. It's like you mentioned, it's a very slowly unfolding film, but every scene is important and every scene carries weight. And from a cast of untrained actors, it's amazing what they were able to get to the screen. I think the closest analog to this film for someone that's like, okay, well, what's it like? It reminds me a lot of Darren Aronofsky did a movie in 2008 called The Wrestler, starring Mickey Rourke, which was about basically an athlete who is in a sort of a, bear with me, kind of like a hyper masculine profession. And that's sort of what the dude in The Rider is in. Not that only men can do this, but he ties a lot of his sense of like what it is to be a man and to be a provider to what he does riding these horses. And he has to make some decisions about whether he continues it or whether he takes a safer route. And that confliction weighs so heavily on the film. Absolutely compelling, really great choice.
Yeah. And another astounding thing is Chloe Zhao, the director. I don't know her ethnicity, but she is not a person. I remember reading that she is not a person that grew up in this area of the country. She's done really two movies. One called "Is Songs My Brother Taught Me," that was filmed kind of in the same area of like, kind of in Wyoming on First Americans, native kind of reservation lands around that area. She's not from that area, but she seems to be able to tell stories in that area like she's lived it, and that is amazing to me too. Also,
all right. Well, sounds like a pretty awesome pick, Jim. You've got a pretty awesome list, it sounds like. Now that we've got your three, Will, we are waiting on pins and needles to hear your final choice. What is it and why?
All right. So this one was mentioned earlier when we were listing some of the amazing horror films that have come out this year. For me, it was a slam dunk to put Hereditary on my list of the top 3 best films of the year. This film stars Toni Collette and Gabriel Byrne as in this horror film about this family that is dealing with both the legacy of a deceased matriarch character and the mother and grandmother character of this family. I'm really trying to avoid spoilers while still talking this film up. And basically the legacy and all of the negative baggage that comes along with that, that's been passed down through the mother and the father and through the children as well. You have some incredibly powerful performances from Toni Collette, from Millie Shapiro. Alex Wolff is like a kind of an assassin in this movie, in that when you first think about this film, his performance is not one of the flashiest, but I think it's one of the most integral, that he played very specific things, very specific ways. It's a very incredibly intelligently written movie, with each scene feeding on the other until it builds to this like kind of fun crescendo. This is everything that I want out of horror movies. This is like when I think about like every year there's like a The Witch or a Babadook or something like that. Hereditary is this year's version of that film, and I'm absolutely enamored by it. First movie in years years that unnerved me enough to where like I was still like, oh man, I don't know if I'm gonna sleep tonight. Like that's usually not something that happens with horror for me, but Hereditary did it.
Yeah, I'm really looking for the next thing that this director does. Will, what was his name? The director.
This is Ari Aster. I think that's
Ari Aster. Yeah. This movie, it really unnerved me in spots. Like this is one of those films that I think just like kind of keeps you off balance. Will, you may have mentioned The Witch already. This film felt to me a lot like The Witch. Kind of had that feeling that like something was acting on this family at the center of this movie that we couldn't see. And we were trying to figure it out, right? Everyone, you know, you have all the people in the audience who think they can outsmart movies and, you know, think about what's going on. And you just don't know until, you know, oh, it's this person. Oh, it's that person, until the movie decides to reveal it to you. It really is a guessing game. And then some of the things, some of the events that happen in this movie are just, and without spoiling, are just downright just terrifying. So great pick, Will. It was on my short list of movies to get to the top 3. I think it was like 4 or 5. So it just didn't make it. I had to go with Annihilation again over Hereditary.
Yeah, I mean, this one's definitely gotten a lot of buzz. Well, I'm so glad that you enjoyed it as much as you did. For me personally, it felt like a rehash of the Paranormal Activity movies, and I think that hurt it to some degree for me. But some really cool things were done visually in this film. Let's not forget the wonderful Aunt Lydia from The Handmaid's Tale, probably my favorite aspect of this film. But, you know, Toni Collette, I mean, when she's not overdoing it with the hysterics, 100% on board, loved the performance. She just, man, anything she's in, she just captures my attention the whole way through. So, yeah, Will, looks like you've got a thought. Go ahead.
More as an aside, like you mentioned Ann Dowd, and Jim, I was actually surprised that, you know, Brad, you reminded me of this. Ann Dowd was in another movie that's in theaters right now that Jim, I thought might have snuck onto your list, and that was American Animals.
Yeah, it made another movie that made my short list. So yeah, she's having quite a run here with movies. She was in American Animals,
movies and Handmaid's Tale. Like it's a killer year for her.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I really love her a lot. Kind of plays a similar kind of character in almost all the movies. So to a point, I guess we can argue that, but hey, I don't care. Bring on more Ann Dowd. I'm happy to see her in any movie. I want to see her as a villain in a Marvel movie soon. That's what I want to see.
Here for it. Yeah.
You know, oh my gosh, not Marvel, but like if Granny Goodness ever needed an actress, Ann Dowd would be it, I think, from the DC end of things.
Oh, okay. Granny Goodness, is that an evil character?
It's like an evil grandma demon character.
She's one of the ones from like the Apocalypse, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yep. Oh, our neighbor's dog is going crazy. Jim, can you hear that in your office?
A little bit.
Holy crap. I wonder if it's, I don't know. Okay. In any event, we've got one more film from me. And this wasn't my number 1 film of the year. That was Won't You Be My Neighbor? This is my number 2 pick. And guys, this is actually a movie. Jim, you and I got to see this at South by Southwest with the director, with the cast. This is a film that is just from start to finish a pure nostalgia machine. Maybe that's manipulating my feelings a little bit, but I don't care. Ready Player One was such a phenomenal film for me this year. It's out now. I actually just bought it on iTunes today. It is a hell of a ride, and there's just so much to love here. I mean, Steven Spielberg directed this film, and he brings a lot of care to sort of bringing Ernest Cline's, the author of the original novel, bringing his vision to the screen. Of course, he collaborated with Ernest Cline in order to do that. And I actually like that they took sort of the basic structure of the book and brought that over to the movie, but they kind of changed some things around so that if you read the book, you don't feel like you're just getting a rehash of the book. Like there's some new stuff that it brings. And there's some smart choices, I think, that are made to adapt this into a movie that I think make it work better. Some of the cast, I mean, I absolutely loved Olivia Cooke. Man, I love her in just about anything. She's one of my favorite parts of Bates Motel. Mm-hmm. And she's great here. I love that she gets a lot to do. Ty Sheridan, who we've been watching. What was that movie with Matthew McConaughey? Was it Mud? Was that the first thing we saw Ty Sheridan in? Man, yeah, good to see him here. Ty Sheridan physically pushed Jim out of the way and jumped on his back to leap onto the stage at South
That
by.
Story changes every time we tell it.
Jim was taking pictures. Anyway, also, too, Lena Waithe. I mean, she's in this film. Not so much TJ Miller. Sorry. Simon Pegg. It was good to see him show up. Just some really great talent in this film. And I think a lot of it for me also kind of stems around seeing so many different properties that I love sort of lovingly brought to the screen in a way that I never thought would be possible. Like, never in my life did I imagine I'd see the Iron fucking Giant like fighting alongside a DeLorean with a Knight Rider light on the front. You know what I mean? And like characters from Overwatch, and I mean just so many cool properties. Like I was just kind of scrolling through the movie because I've been waiting till it came out to do this, trying to pick out like every single pop culture reference I could find, and I keep finding more and more things like I didn't notice the first 3 times we saw this movie. So this is a super fun nostalgia ride for me. It's a big old Steven Spielberg love letter, I think, to the 70s and 80s. Holds a very special place in my heart. Guys, I know we reviewed this on the podcast, but for anyone who didn't listen to that episode, what did you think?
Yeah, I mean, I loved it because it was great to see Spielberg back doing something that had that much action in it, and it felt that much, kind of alive again. I've been kind of on a Spielberg kick. I went back and I actually got a chance to watch Raiders of the Lost Ark on the big screen at a movie theater when I was on travel. I was going through movies and I'm like, saw that. Oh, that sucks. I'm not seeing that. And then it was like, Raiders of the Lost Ark, really? On a big screen? I'm there. So I went and I watched it on the big screen for, I can't tell you when the last time was I saw that on the big screen, but it was amazing. Of course, with Jurassic World coming out, revisiting parts of Jurassic Park, which is still the best movie in that whole franchise. I think I haven't heard anybody that really disagrees with that is the best movie of.
That's an easy sell
of the Jurassic thing. So, but the thing about Ready Player One, it was such a great experience to see that movie at South by, first of all, at the Paramount Theater. Steven Spielberg walks on the stage. That makes it extra special. So yeah, maybe my festival glasses are on a little bit for that experience, but it's still great to see Spielberg do his thing on the big screen. And so that's a good pick, Brad. I mean, if there was one, it came down to like 2 big kind of action movies that made my like top 10 list. None of them made my top 3, but it was going to be either Ready Player One or Black Panther. And so I think they kind of canceled each other out and didn't make my top 3, but yeah, good pick.
Yeah. And I know we went over this when we did our review, and I was lower on this one than you guys, but there's definitely some things to enjoy about Ready Player One. Certainly, like, this is a fun movie. Like, anything else you say about it, there's a lot of fun just like jammed into every corner of this film. And it does have this sequence, which I don't want to spoil for anyone that's not mentioned it, but let's just say the second challenge. Mm-hmm. The second challenge, was so much fun for me as they went through all of that. And And so I think that like that particular scene is one that I'll always remember, just kind of how much fun it was to see show up on screen.
Yep.
No,
Good. Yeah. Good, Brad.
I was just going to say, totally co-signed.
Mm-hmm.
Jim, did you have another thought? I interrupted you.
Sorry. I didn't. No, I was fine. I just wanted to say that I wanted to welcome Bill into the chat. Bill Harris joined us.
I was just going to read some listener comments. So Bill Harris, same last name, so you know he's got to be a good guy. It says, Movie Bear Men and people in the chat, greetings. This is the definitive half of the Green Screen of Death podcast. I love how, Bill, you call yourself the definitive half. I love you and Adrian Charlie equally. But Bill says his list is Leave No Trace, Isle of Dogs, which did not get brought up, also a great film, and Annihilation. So, Jim, looks like Bill's right up there with you. Some other ones that were mentioned in the chat, Deadpool 2 didn't make our lists. Very popular film this year. Black Panther. Some other folks were saying things like, what else am I missing?
Bill said Leave No Trace. I haven't seen that one yet. If anyone's seen it, maybe you?
Not yet, only because that doesn't open in Austin until this weekend, I believe. But that's the new one with Ben Foster that I've started seeing some trailers for it. Violet Crown. So yeah, I'm excited to see that one. It just hasn't.
What's up with dudes from Canada getting to see movies before we do? I thought we were making America great again. What the fuck happened?
Bill? I live in Austin. How did you get something first?
It's because we're apparently so focused on building a wall that, you know,
we're building a wall to keep the good movies out.
Right? Anymore.
We don't want them good movies here in our country anymore.
Steve Souza has a potentially unpopular opinion. Jurassic Park 2 greater than Jurassic Park?
Oh, fuck that. I am flipping a table right now. Sorry.
But anyway, if anybody else has like their favorite movie that they've seen this year, please throw it in chat because you're running out of time.
So Infinity War was another one that was mentioned. Jordan and Steve both called out Infinity War. A lot of superhero movies, obviously, every year now. Guys, did Infinity War come close to making your lists at all? I'm curious.
Kind of. So when I was doing my list, I ended up with my top 10 and had to whittle it down. And usually I'm not seeing like a bunch of superhero movies this high up in the list this far into the year, but both Avengers, Infinity War, and Black Panther were in the discussion, and both of them fell out. So did there were some great films like Isle of Dogs you mentioned. The Endless, Bill Harris just says no, The Endless, Will. So as I sat down today, it was between Won't You Be My Neighbor and The Endless. That was the final four. And I decided, since I already had Annihilation and Hereditary, that I would kind of take a breather from sci-fi horror and put a documentary in there. But yeah, The Endless is number 3 with an asterisk next to it.
Yep. For me, I would say Infinity War was probably, if I took all the movies I saw this year, it's probably kind of like near the middle of the pack, maybe for me. With Black Panther being much higher.
Yeah, Black Panther just barely missed my list. I fucking loved that movie. There's so much to enjoy there, but like, we limited ourselves to a top 3, and of course, there's got to be a line somewhere, I guess. It'll be interesting to see, though, when we get to December or January, when we do our best of 2018, the whole year. You know, if maybe any of those movies, who knows, upon a rewatch or something, might kind of make their way up that list. Would be curious to see. We've also got some more superhero movies coming out. Ant-Man and the Wasp is coming, so we'll have to see what happens. But guys, we've talked about a lot of great movies on this week's show. It's been fun kind of taking this trip down movie memory lane with all of you. Let's do some quick plugs before we wrap things up for this week. Plugs, of course, is the part of the show where we tell you great things we're interested in and maybe you want to check out too. Will, you had mentioned Steven Universe earlier, and my plug this week is Steven Universe. Steven Universe is back with new episodes. We're getting one every night this week. You know, we talked about Won't You Be My Neighbor and all the wonderful things that Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood did for kids growing up in Jim, your generation, and Will and I's generation.
Right.
I feel like without like looking at the camera like Mr. Rogers did and talking to kids, Steven Universe probably accomplishes something on a similar level without that direct talking to. Just so many amazing messages of acceptance and body positivity and you know, queer diversity and all kinds of just amazing things in a children's cartoon you wouldn't think a cartoon would frickin' address. Steven Universe does, and it does it in a way that is funny, and it makes you cry, and it makes you just love, you know, being human and being alive. So I'm really excited. We got to watch the new episode last night. We've got another new one right when we're done with the podcast. Jim, I know you're kind of new to Steven Universe. We recently went through the series. I'm curious, Jim, where you kind of stand on the show now. I know I'm blindsiding you a little bit, but how are you feeling now that you're kind of all caught up and current with Will and I?
I like it. I want to see where it goes next. Where it's going to keep going in Steven's journey. It's gotten very convoluted in the last several episodes. You know, there's been some pretty heavy stuff laid on the fans. So we'll see how that all plays out. I see it in very dark contrast to, it's almost like two shows. It's kind of like Steven's life in Beach City, you know what I mean? And the community and all his friends and the gems. And then there's this like big adventure, you know, hero's journey kind of thing that's going on. And it's the two kind of mashed together in an interesting way. And lately they've serviced the big hero's journey part of it. And they've kind of neglected kind of the more quaint and, you know, character moment kind of things that I kind of really love about the show. I like when they get the mix right. Right now they're running a little lean in terms of plot. So, you know, hopefully they'll find that balance again for me, but I'm still digging the show. I'm going to watch it.
All right. Awesome. Well, I'm glad to hear that you're enjoying it. Will, I know you're a fan too. If anyone else is a fan of Steven Universe, Cartoon Network airs them in this really weird, like random schedule. It's almost like you hardly ever know new episodes are coming. It's a big frustration with the show sometimes, but if you weren't aware that the show is back, it is. Go binge it and catch up.
Can I do a plug within a plug real quick?
As long as you don't plug within a pearl.
Not going to be too much plugception, but if someone is thinking about getting on board the Steven Universe bandwagon and giving it a try, but they're not quite convinced yet, we actually recorded a bonus episode, was it about a year ago, where we kind of did like a little primer for people who had not experienced the show yet. And then we did some spoiler deep dive afterwards on some of our favorite episodes. But I think that would be a great place to start. Steven Universe, for Mark, who's asking in chat, it's a kids program about this. Think about like those shows that have like the equivalent of like magic space princess type characters who protect Earth. But imagine that one of them is a 10-year-old boy. And that's kind of where the premise kicks off. But the show is just this rich tapestry of some of the most complex and nuanced writing that I've seen. It's also got some of the best looks at non-traditional family units, which I think are very important for people in our community, as well as some of just the gender fluidity and just acceptance that this show has. It's smart, it's funny, it's beautifully drawn, and the musical moments are just top notch. So it's a kids program that I think any adult with at least half a heart or more should be able to enjoy.
Indeed. Will, great call out referencing back to that bonus episode. I almost feel like we need to get Chris Lopez and Steve from Sacramento Movie Bears and Jim together on the show again after this 5-episode Stephen Bomb and catch up and dish.
I wasn't on the first one.
You weren't. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
We gotta bring you in now that you're current with the show.
Okay.
And maybe we'll investigate that.
Yeah, it might be a fun, like, I think revisiting that would be fun to do. Not just now, but from time to time. Like, especially this week is dropping some big stuff. So I think there'll be a lot to discuss in the wake of this week.
All right. Well, maybe I will reach out to the boys and see what they're up to. Maybe we can make that work. I don't want plugs to be all about Steven Universe, though. So, Jim, what have you got for your plug this week?
I don't know if Will had plugged this movie before, but I got to see it. We mentioned it already on the show. It's a movie that I got to catch up with because, unfortunately, Brad has been buried in work and he had to work one of the days last weekend. So I took myself to the movie to see something called American Animals. This was a movie that we had a chance to see at South by Southwest, and we picked another movie instead. It was kind of like the first day. And we're like, okay. And then I started hearing good things about it, and it came out here in Tucson. So I went to see it, and it kind of blew me away. Like, I wasn't expecting a lot from this movie, and I was shocked at how much I really, really liked this movie. This was a solid film. It's called American Animals. This one does star Ann Dowd. It also stars Barry Keoghan, who was in a movie called The Sacred Deer.
Killing of a Sacred Deer.
Killing of a Sacred Deer, which we also liked. And mostly I like the movie because this actor is absolutely riveting on the screen in that movie, and he's very good in this one too. This is about 4 kids, about college age, maybe a little bit older. Somehow they feel like they have to liven up their lives by attempting one of the most crazy art heists in history. And they're bumbling their way through this heist, and this is a true story. This isn't just made up. These are 4 kids that decided to go steal this stuff from this library, and it's about the real story of what happened during the heist, the lead up to the heist, and a little bit about the aftermath. I was surprised. It's kind of a mixture of it's a reenactment. I would say it's about 90% reenactment and 10% documentary, because they do actually get the real guys who did the real heist into the movie to talk about what the fuck they were thinking when they were planning this heist and executing this heist. American Animals, check it out. If you have a chance to see this one near you, this one's worth seeing. I did not see the new Ocean's 8, so I can't compare the heist movies, but I will say it's one of the better heist movies I've seen in quite a long time.
It's way better than Ocean's 8. Good plug.
Okay. Good.
All right. Awesome, Jim. And Will, what have you got this week?
So mine's a bit of a teaser for a written review that will be up on our site, which will go into a little more detail. But I had a chance to see Sorry to Bother You, new film by writer-director Boots Riley, starring Lakeith Stanfield, who is a name that you should know. This is, or if you don't yet, you will soon. He's one of the leads in Atlanta. He was one of the supporting characters in Get Out from last year, as well as what else did he have? He had parts in Selma, and he was in Short Term 12. That's, I think, the first thing that I remember seeing him in. And he's this dude in, it's like an alternate reality version of modern day Oakland. He's living with his girlfriend Tessa Thompson, who I love to death, and he gets this job working in a telemarketing thing. We're like doing sales, and he discovers this trick that helps him get more sales. And guys, you've probably seen. Maybe you've seen the trailers already. If you haven't, you should definitely watch them. The trailers are already compelling. But what you don't learn from the trailers is just how batshit crazy this movie is. This movie is so much fun, and it goes to some pretty bonkers places, to the point where I think Sorry to Bother You is probably the most what the fuck movie that I've seen this year. And that's as someone who's seen Annihilation. So Sorry to Bother You is totally worth watching when it hits theaters. I'll have more written up so you can read on the site, but figured I would plug my plug. If that's yeah. I figured I'd plug my plug while we were here.
Nice, Will. Awesome. We'll definitely have to catch up with that one for sure. Well, it has been an awesome show. So great talking about so many wonderful movies, and great hanging out with everybody in the live chat this week too. We had a lot of folks coming in and out throughout the episode. Couldn't always keep up with the conversation. It moves kind of fast sometimes, but really great hearing your guys' picks for some of your top films of 2018 thus far as well. If you didn't listen live, if you're listening through the magic of digital tape delay on iTunes, Stitcher, etc., not to worry. We still want to hear from you too. So when you see the episode go live on Facebook, Twitter, wherever, feel free to reply to that post and let us know what your picks are for the best films of 2018 so far. I feel like we could talk for another 3 hours, guys, about more great movies, and even more so when we get to the end of the year. But if you want to be part of that discussion, join us on Facebook or Twitter. And guys, how can people interact with you on Facebook, Twitter, or other online outlets? Jim, how about you?
Well, people can follow me on Twitter at JJP Out West. That's all one word. Not really a word, I guess. It's my initials in 2 words. JJP Out West, all together. Find me on Twitter there. You can also find me on Facebook under my name, Jim Pugliafico. And you can also find us on Twitter. Brad, you already mentioned, right? The Movie Bears podcast on Twitter.
At MB Podcast, yeah.
At MB Podcast. Find us there. That's where you'll get kind of like alerts about when our show is going live, usually the night of, around this time, well, around 6:30 Pacific time. So unless we make changes. So check us out.
All right. Awesome. And Will, how about you?
Yes. I am on Twitter. I am at Whatever Cove on Twitter. I don't post there as much as I should. And mostly these days it's political outrage, but hey, it's 2018. I'm also on Facebook. Just look for me there. My name is William Lindus, Lindus. Please, if you're going to add me, just send me a message so I know that you're someone coming in from the show. I'm also on Letterboxd, which is a film review site that allows people to do lists and rank their favorite films. It's what keeps me sane through the year as I track the hundreds of movies that we've watched and talked about. I would not be able to do this list if I wasn't tracking them on Letterboxd. So just look for me, William Lindus. Please add me. I'd love to follow you back.
All right, awesome. And if you want to find me online, just look for Brad Harris on Facebook. I'm the one who probably has some Bear, Chub, Chaser, whatever friends in common with you. But definitely, if you want to chat, please send me a message first as well. With all those crazy bots out there these days, which are getting smarter and smarter at seeming real, it's hard to tell, who's fake and who's not. So send a message. Again, let us know you're from the podcast. You can also find me on Twitter at iBradPro, as well as Instagram at MSU Big Guy. So guys, that's it for this week. We'll figure out what we're doing next week, and we'll see you all then. As always, thanks so much for your support of the show. This was episode 287 of the Movie Bears podcast. Crazy that we are almost at that 300 episode mark. I'm wondering if we're going to hit that around the time for our next anniversary. show?
Well, gosh, I think so. What if we got 13 episodes is 13 weeks? That's what, like 12, like 3.5 months. Gosh, it's gonna get close.
Yeah.
If not, should we no, this would be dumb. I just, in my mind, I was like, oh, we should like do a retrospective of like the movie 300 for our 300th episode.
Yeah.
I love that idea. That could be really fun. All right. We'll have to talk. We'll have to make some plans for our big 300 celebration. Jordan Riley in the chat says, no, please don't go. Jordan and everybody else, it has been wonderful hanging out with you all this week, but we got to go. But we will see you all next time. Have a good week, everybody. And if you're in the United States, happy 4th of July. Please be safe. Please be sane. And please, sorry for the Bob Barker moment, but think of your pets who may be at home alone and scared with the fireworks. Please take care of your puppies, kitties, fish, sugar gliders, whatever it is. Fireworks are scary. Goodbye, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.